Hey, welcome to this episode of Light 'em Up. We take a deep dive on the criminal justice system, crime scene investigation, and leadership. We enlighten, educate, and empower others with the truth. Like it or not, the truth disturbs, the truth divides, but ultimately, the truth delivers. Hey, I'm your host, Phil Rizzo. I'm the principal owner of Rizzo's Protective Group. We are a high-risk security consulting firm headquartered out of Akron, Ohio, and with offices in the Bronx, New York, and Cerro Alto, the Dominican Republic. And as we put the ball on the tee to line things up for kickoff, we speak life, health, and prosperity over each and every one of you, and we want to thank you for listening. Hey, October is recognized as National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Domestic Violence Awareness Month evolved from the First Day of Unity, observed in October of 1981 by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. The intent was to connect battered women's advocates across the nation who were working to end violence against women and their children. The Day of Unity soon became a special week when a wide range of activities were conducted at the local, state, and national levels. Although these activities were as varied and diverse as the program sponsors, they all shared these common themes. 1. Mourning those who had died as a result of domestic violence. 2. Celebrating those who have survived domestic violence. And 3. Connecting those who work to end domestic violence. It's always best practices when training or helping to educate others to start with a definition of the problem. And here on Light 'em Up, we promise to always enlighten, educate, and empower with our information. So we try our best to do our best to provide support and education while navigating the criminal justice system. According to the hotline.org, and you'll hear that web address multiple times throughout this broadcast, but according to the hotline.org, domestic violence, also known as DV, is a pattern of behaviors used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. DV, often referred to as intimate partner violence or IPV, or relationship dating violence, comes in many different forms, including, and we'll go through a list of them, for example, physical, and the use or threat of physical force with the intent to cause harm. This can include shoving, strangling, grabbing, or throwing objects at the victim, as well as emotional and verbal, using words or the lack of words to purposely cause harm to the partner. This includes things like name-calling, humiliation, the silent treatment, and gaslighting. Also sexual in nature, any kind of unwanted sexual behavior. An example would be performing sexual intercourse with the partner without consent. And any other control tactics, anything else that the perpetrator does to manipulate and control their partner. This can be anything from withholding money from the victim or having complete control over how the money is spent to even withholding sleep from the victim. Today, taking the witness stand here on Light 'em Up, we have the distinct honor and high privilege to talk with Leanne Biltz, volunteer coordinator of Hope and Healing, the Battered Women's Shelter, and the Rape Crisis Center of Summit and Medina counties. Leanne, welcome to the big show. Welcome to Light 'em Up.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to have this conversation. So thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. It really is. And we're looking forward to it as well. So thank you as well for being here in advance. Hey, Leanne, let's dive right in. Leanne, can you share with our listeners about your role within Hope and Healing as the volunteer coordinator? And to follow up on that, can you share some of the essential services that Hope and Healing provides to the public?
Sure. So my official title is a volunteer coordinator. I train volunteers and supervise interns at Battered Women's Shelter and Rape Crisis Center, but I also provide education and outreach to the community. So in nonprofit world, you usually wear multiple hats. Those are kind of my two areas of focus. And some essential services that Hope and Healing provides are we provide emergency shelter for those fleeing abuse through the Battered Women's Shelter. We provide free therapy to survivors and co-survivors of sexual abuse or intimate partner violence, while we provide hospital advocacy for those seeking a forensic medical exam or what might be known as a rape kit. And we also provide rapid rehousing programs for folks to help them obtain and maintain a place of their own after they leave shelter.
I see. Wow. A wide variety and a wide range of services. That's really important. That really is. That's fantastic. That's great to hear. So what led you you towards, or what drew you in to your interest in working at Hope and Healing?
Sure. So I actually started my career out of college working in corrections, and I worked with men and women in the corrections field. And I really, truly enjoyed listening to their stories, just being an advocate, just using my active listening skills. So I always knew that I wanted to work with people. And just my personal life, I've always been an advocate for women. I've always identified as a feminist. So being an advocate and just helping to end violence against women is just so near and dear to my heart.
I see. Absolutely. In our intro, Leanne, did we cover adequately what domestic violence is comprised of? I mean, I know it's an encompassing definition, but if we left any important aspects out, feel free to add to the definition that we shared about domestic violence.
I think that the definition that was provided earlier was adequate. It's kind of domestic violence and intimate partner violence can be interchanged, but they also are a little bit different in the sense of domestic violence does include folks who usually live in the same household. They don't have to be an intimate partner. So it could be, sibling versus sibling. It could be a parent versus a child. It could be roommates. All of that is domestic violence. What makes intimate partner violence different is those folks might not be under the same household, right? They could be boyfriends and boyfriends or girlfriends and girlfriends, but there is that intimate part. There is that romantic connection that those partners have. So it's a little bit confusing. They kind of are the same, but then they have some aspects that make them different.
I see. Okay. That's a good definition and important. We appreciate that, clarifying that for us. We want to stress that help is available to those who are experiencing domestic violence. If you are in immediate danger and it is safe to do so, you can call 911. You can also call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233, and 7233 spells out the word SAFE. Also, the Battered Women's Shelter, their hotline number is 330-374-1111. Leanne, I've heard of the Summit County Sexual Assault Response Team, or SART, which is comprised of a group of allied experts committed to enhancing the health and healing of victims/survivors impacted by the crime and trauma of sexual violence, while heightening community awareness and facilitating offender accountability. Leanne, is Hope and Healing part of the Summit County Sexual Assault Response Team, or SART?
Yes, we are.
What does the Summit County Sexual Assault Response Team, what are some of their qualities or characteristics of that organization or group of entities? What do they do that you know of that you can share with the public other than what I mentioned?
So it is a team, like you said, comprised of like a multidisciplinary team of advocates, law enforcement, therapists, community providers that come together and just ensure that survivors are getting the best services, the best treatment that they can receive, and just so that we're all on the same page, being very trauma informed, going over case reviews, how can we improve, where do we struggle, and things like that. So it's just a team, like you said, of folks coming together, making sure that people are getting the best services that they can.
Okay. Now, we all know that domestic violence doesn't discriminate. I imagine that the victims of DV can be from any socioeconomic group, any educational level, gender or ethnicity, things along those lines. And the vast majority, 85% in one statistic that we found leading up to our conversation, of victims are female who are abused by male partners. While given the fact that victims can be from any walk of life, a predominance of research shows that racial and ethnic minority women and men continue to bear a relatively heavier burden of sexual violence, stalking, and domestic violence. So my question would be, who are the victims of domestic violence?
Yeah, like you said, they really run the gamut of folks. Domestic violence and the intimate partner violence and sexual violence really do not discriminate. Women, it is a gender-based violence, so women are often more likely to become victims of sexual violence or intimate partner violence. But it is important to recognize that at the shelter, we do take men. We take men, women, LGBTQ folks, immigrants, refugees, elderly folks. We take anyone that suffers this crime because it really doesn't discriminate. But you're right, folks of color, women of color are often victims of this crime as opposed to their white counterparts.
I see. And you mentioned that the Battered Women's Shelter does operate for men as well, or people who identify as that. To follow up on that, given the fact fact that the shelter does provide for men, where would a man go if they didn't go to the shelter? It seems as though the shelter is the source, the only source that provides this type of assistance to men. Is that true? Am I along the right lines with that?
Yes, you certainly are. I think our shelter is unique in the fact that we do accept men. I cannot recall another shelter that does so locally in our area.
Okay. And with the numbers that you see locally and nationally in October of 2021, how widespread is domestic violence?
The research shows that intimate partner violence affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men. So again, it does affect men. It does affect them as well. And these are just folks that report, so the numbers could be a little bit skewed. They could be higher rates. These are just people reporting. So 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men. And that equates to 12 million people a year. So this is a public health, issue that folks are suffering. And another important figure that I always like to point out, because it's very alarming and it should make people upset, but 3 women die every day by their intimate partner in the United States.
Wow.
That could be a boyfriend, that could be a husband, a former partner, anybody that has that intimate partner relationship. That is alarming. 3 women every day in the United States. Like, this is such a problem, and it just gets swept underneath the rug,
Yeah, that is absolutely stunning. I always go back to the fact that our country should look at this as a national security issue. Just like problems with education, we should look at them as national security issues, because if we don't address these issues, they're going to just plague us from within. Those are just my ideas. How widespread in your research is stalking?
Yeah, stalking does happen as well. Again, it's shown 1 in 6 women report being stalked by an intimate partner, and 1 in 19 men report being stalked. With the most common form of stalking is like phone calls, voicemails, text messages, that unwanted repeated behavior.
I see. Yes, that definition I've heard of. I've heard that before, the unwanted repeated behavior. Absolutely. How widespread are sexual assaults of intimate partners, if you have any knowledge regarding that?
Sure. So I've mostly seen research on women regarding this, but 1 in 10 women have been raped by their intimate partner. And it's important to recognize that even if you are in a committed relationship with your partner, you must get consent every single time. It is not a given that your consent is just a given all the time, 24 hours a day.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk more about that as we go further. We're going to touch specifically on a law that was established in 1975. We'll talk more about that. That's an excellent point that you bring up, and that's important for the public to know. Absolutely. In Summit and Medina counties, and nationally, if you know, to what extent is domestic violence, which, if I hear you correctly, you're calling it interpersonal violence, which is fine, I understand. To what extent is interpersonal violence reported to law enforcement, and what percentage actually reaches the courts?
That is a difficult one to put your finger on. I mean, nationally, the research shows that these crimes are highly underreported just due to the personal nature of the crime. This is generally the person that you love and that you trust, that you maybe are the father or the mother of your children, and there's that preservation of family. You don't want to call the police on your partner. It's a very difficult thing to do. These people aren't strangers. Mm-hmm. So it's very highly underreported. And some folks just don't trust law enforcement. They've had bad experiences with law enforcement. Some people have the idea that intimate partner violence stays in the home, and we don't need to involve other people in it. It's something that the 2 people can work out. So all those factors really lead to it being highly underreported. And I'm not sure the percentage that actually reaches the courts. I would guess that it's not very high, because unfortunately this is one of those crimes that's like, what people say, like the he said, she said kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Given the fact that nothing is absolute or for certain, is there any truth to the statement that those that were abused abuse?
The jury is out on that one. I know that some research shows kids that witness violence often repeat those behaviors. We see that in shelters sometimes. Kids who come in with their mothers pick up on some tactics that their abusive fathers or the abusive partner has shown, and they kind of reenact that towards the mom. But then some research shows that when kids grow up witnessing violence, they realize that that's not right, and they kind of go the other route. So the jury is kind of out on that one regarding the research.
Okay. The National Domestic Violence Hotline provides confidential and anonymous support 24/7. Reach out by phone at 1-800-799-7233. Also, loveisrespect.org, and we'll provide the URL in our liner notes for this particular podcast episode. But loveisrespect.org provides teens and young adults confidential and anonymous support. Its number is 1-866-331-9474. Leanne, is age an important risk factor? For example, are younger defendants more likely to re-abuse and recidivate other than older defendants?
Well, at Hope and Healing, we actually don't work with any perpetrators or alleged perpetrators, so I don't have specific answers. I don't really have any research on perpetrators themselves.
Okay. Is substance abuse in those that abuse their intimate partners an important risk factor as well also?
Yes, so there is a connection between substance use and intimate partner violence, both on the abuser's side and the survivor's side. So the abuser often, we have found that they do suffer some sort of substance abuse, misuse issues, with alcohol and cocaine being the most abused in these circumstances. And our survivors also do suffer from some substance abuse as well, due to them trying to cope with the abuse and the stress and the trauma that they've dealt with. So they kind of use substance abuse as well. So it can be on the abuser's side, and then for coping mechanisms, our survivor's side.
I see. Self-medicate maybe to try to numb or alleviate the pain. Things like
yes.
that. Okay, I follow you. Abusers don't announce their behavior at the start of a relationship. If they did, things would never progress beyond the first date, for sure. And in the security field, where I've dedicated my career for the past 30 years, there are things that are referred to as pre-attack indicators or advanced warning indicators. And these are overt actions taken before criminal behavior takes place, what is referred to as the thrill before the kill. I know in every situation is different, and they can be different, and there can be different indicators that lead up to this type of behavior. And we always talk about looking for red flags, but I know this specific type of violence can take place without any provocation or advanced warning and with no signs at all. For example, abusers can be charming, they can be jealous, controlling, and manipulative, and they can blame others for their problems. They also can do an assortment of other behaviors, such as rush into a relationship and try to sweep a person off of their feet, or proclaim love at first sight and insist that the person spends all of their time with them. Leanne, my question is, are there any traits in common that are shared by many abusers?
Yeah, there are a lot, actually, and some of them you definitely hit on. I always say that abusers don't come out, per se swinging on the first date, right? Like, they show their best selves, they put their best foot forward, and kind of once they know that they have this person's trust is when their real self comes out. So yeah, some common traits are using isolation. Abusers can isolate their partners from friends, family, from having a job, limiting their outside movement, things like that. You touched on not taking responsibility for their actions. So this is, minimizing, denying, or even blaming the abuse on the survivor. And another thing we often see is using their male privilege when the male is the abuser. So this looks like having strict gender roles. I'm the guy, I do X, Y, and Z, and I stay in my gender role, and you're the woman, you do these things, and you stay in your gender role, and it's not a shared responsibility. It's not a shared household. When gender roles are strict like that, the likelihood for violence goes up.
I see.
Some other traits are making the survivor feel like they're going crazy, playing mind games, and like you said, kind of that too much too soon. Moving in after 3 months, or saying I love you after the third date. Some of those can be red flags for sure.
I see. Okay. Leanne, do us a big favor, if you would. Share with us your 24-hour crisis hotline numbers for our listeners.
Sure. So the Rape Crisis Center, like Phil said, is 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can give us a call, and that number is 330 330-434-7273. And the Battered Women's Shelter also has a 24-hour hotline. Folks have to call this hotline in order to get into our shelter. And that number is 330-374-1111.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for that. You know, we hear in the national security realm, especially from the Department of Homeland Security, that says, if you see something, say something. What can I do, or what can we do, our listeners, today, right now, if we know someone is being abused domestically or suffering from interpersonal violence?
Sure. The most important thing, if you know somebody that you think is in a type of relationship that's with like an intimate partner violence relationship, the number one thing you can do is listen to them and do not blame them. Believe these folks who are telling you the abuse that they're suffering, validate the seriousness of what they're telling you, and just support them and empower them to make their own decisions. Because as you said, these crimes are about power and control, and they have probably, their power and control has probably been taken away from them. So empowering them to make their own decisions, they know their lives best, and then you can provide the hotline for them to call as well.
Absolutely. Domestic violence can be described as the power misused by one adult in a relationship to control another. It is the establishment of control and fear in a relationship through violence and other forms of abuse. This violence can take the form of physical assault, psychological abuse, social abuse, financial abuse, or a sexual assault as well. Now, the frequency of the violence can be on and off, occasional or chronic, and economic dependence has been found to be one of the central reasons why an individual might stay. Without the ability to sustain themselves economically, women are forced, or actually anyone is forced, to stay in an abusive relationship and are not able to be free from that violence. Now, our research leading up to our conversation today, we came across a factoid that stated that according to the Ohio Domestic Violence Network, ODVN is the acronym for that, 58% of the Ohio DV programs report more severe DV-related injuries, including a notable rise in incidents of non-fatal strangulation since the start of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Leanne, have you found that there have been any increase whatsoever in the incidents of domestic violence during the pandemic?
Yes. So, like you said, this is nationally there has been an increase of intimate partner violence through the pandemic. But unfortunately, folks are having a harder time getting away from their abusive partners. They've been quarantined with them. There's less chance to leave, less chance to develop a safety plan with our advocates and come to the shelter. The abuser might have lost their job or they're working from home now. So it's unfortunate that there has been an increase, but unfortunately people can't get the help that they need.
I see. That is a definite catch-22 for sure. A push or a physical shove is the most common act of spousal interpersonal aggression. And leading up to our conversation, some research we uncovered was that on the average, a woman has been assaulted 35 times before calling the police for the very first time. What would be a guesstimate or an estimate of the total percentage of calls that your agency receives annually that directly involve the police?
I would guess a small percentage of calls we receive directly involve the police, just for reasons I stated beforehand. Sometimes folks have bad relationships with the police. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the police have come to these folks' homes before and nothing has been done. So there's a little bit of mistrust with the police.
Sure.
And, it's difficult to call the police on your partner or on your loved one. So I would guess it's a small percentage.
Okay. No, I understand everything you mentioned. Those are all very valid points, and they're well taken as well. In continuing, a couple questions regarding the police, regarding law enforcement. A total of 11% of police departments have specialized domestic violence units, according to a national survey of a representative sample of 14,000 law enforcement agencies. And from your experience working directly in the area of domestic violence, are specialized law enforcement domestic violence units effective in responding to domestic violence?
Yes, we believe so. The more specialized training training that police departments get, the better educated they are in recognizing abuse, not victim blaming, and understanding the tactics that abusers use. It's important to recognize that abusers are master manipulators and can manipulate the scene to look like, sometimes that they are the victim. So educating folks in recognizing abuse, recognizing that those tactics that our abusers use is very important.
Absolutely. And you answered my next question. You had mentioned that any specialized training goes a long way to making an impactful difference. So let's talk a little bit about first offenders. Can first offenders be safely diverted or discharged? I mean, in many jurisdictions, a substantial proportion of domestic violence defendants are diverted or are given dispositions without having guilty findings imposed.
What we teach in my experience, abusers are very intentional and they often continue to abuse. I'm sure some folks maybe stop being the first-time offenders if they're in some, like you said, a diversion or a diversion program or things like that, perhaps some anger management. Perhaps that cycle can be broken, but in what we see, it's very intentional. And unfortunately, these folks continue to abuse and they continue to kind of accumulate more survivors.
I see. Let's talk a little bit about mandatory arrest laws regarding domestic violence or interpersonal violence. You had mentioned before, and it was a point well taken on my part, that some people do have a mistrust with law enforcement. So the law that's active in 22 states, including the state of Ohio, says that police officers responding to a call for help would no longer need to determine whether a person was truly violent or out of control every time someone reported abuse. The police would simply be required to make an arrest. And some have suggested that mandatory arrest laws may be intimidating victims from actually calling the police to report an instance of abuse, like you had mentioned before, that it is difficult to call law enforcement on a loved one. So what are your thoughts on these particular laws?
If I could, I just want to share like a personal story.
Sure.
Because I don't mind disclosing that I'm a survivor of intimate partner violence, which is probably another reason why I'm so passionate about this. I should have mentioned that before.
Mm-hmm.
But in my abuse, I was younger and my abuser was older, and every time I wanted to call the police, he would threaten to call the police first, or he would threaten to get a restraining order out on me. And I didn't want that on my record. I was in college. I didn't want that to affect any jobs I had. I didn't know if that went on my record.
Mm-hmm.
So that deterred me from calling. And I do know that some police departments still kind of side with whoever makes that 911 call first. Even, again, the abusers are really smart. And if they call 911 first, sometimes the police departments are not really sure who the abuser is, and they might mistakenly arrest the survivor or the victim.
I see. Wow. That's incredible. That information there is powerful, really. What would be, if you'd be willing to share, what would be some of the barriers to reporting domestic violence or interpersonal violence and accessing services? You mentioned some that you personally went through, but what would be some other barriers that people might encounter from reporting this?
Sure. There are many reasons why folks don't report or don't leave that relationship in general. You mentioned financial reasons. Financial abuse happens in 99% of intimate partner violence situations. So financial abuse looks like taking paychecks, changing the ATM password, and not letting your partner know how much is in the bank account. That is financial abuse. And there's financial reasons why people can't leave. They can't afford to get their own house or an apartment. But there's also preservation of the home. You want to keep your family intact. There's religious beliefs. Some folks are taught that divorce is not an option.
Mm-hmm.
And children, there's a reason to keep the family together because of children. But ultimately, the number one reason is this person loves the abuser. And it is hard to leave that person. It is hard to call the police, as we have mentioned before. You want this person to get better. Sure. I know in my situation, I thought I could make this person better. And every now and then, I would always say I had one good day out of the month. And that one good day that we had, I would see the kind of person that I wanted him to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that one good day would propel me through the next horrible month that I had until I got that one good day again. And then that would propel me. So it's a really complicated situation.
I see. Wow. Wow, that's interesting. I'm sure our listeners can relate. I'm sure you wouldn't be the only person in a situation like that, because I think abusers, they prey. They prey on their victims, or on the individuals that they do what they do to. So that's it's a very difficult situation. Absolutely, absolutely. Leanne, a report from the NIJ, the National Institute of Justice, states that 40 to 45% of women in abusive relationships are sexually assaulted by their abusive partner, with more than half of those women assaulted multiple times. Now, we had mentioned earlier about a law in 1975, but it wasn't until 1975 when marital rape without legal ramifications was allowed and justified by the widely accepted belief that in those times that women could not be raped by their husbands because sex is a part of their wifely duties. And like I had mentioned to you, only a man could come up with an idiotic idea such as that. But with the pressure from women's rights organizations, every state in the U.S. passed legislation eliminating the marital exemption and debunking this ancient notion that is really rooted in rape culture and victim blaming. And, even with this policy, over half of the 50 states still exempted husbands from prosecution, despite the newly instated sexual offense clause. Now, in Ohio, this loophole is still prevalent and excuses spousal rape when consent cannot be given due to the victim being impaired in some sort of capacity. This essentially means a husband is legally allowed to rape his wife if she is drugged, inebriated, mentally or physically incapacitated in any way, unconscious, or even asleep. A bill sponsored by Representatives Laura Lenise of the 23rd District and Kristen Boggs of the 18th District in Ohio seek to eliminate marital exemptions for the crimes of rape, statutory rape, sexual battery, gross sexual imposition, and importuning, providing equal protections under the law for married survivors and victims of sexual offenses, and bringing Ohio's laws into the 21st century. In your educational outreach and advocacy, have you heard of Ohio House Bill 121, which is the latest attempt to close the spousal exemption loophole for sex crimes in Ohio? And if yes, if you have heard of it, has your agency been involved in any of the lobbying to push to get this bill passed?
I have not, but thank you so much for bringing it to my attention, and I am just sickened by that loophole. As you stated, that is rape culture to a T. That's nuts. And our agency has not been involved with any lobbying, but I'm going to look into this House Bill 121 and see what we can do about that, because that goes against everything that we teach.
Absolutely. And I'll send you the information specifically on that to help you with your follow-up. Absolutely. You had mentioned, and I believe the statistic was 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. How can we collectively improve the system of intervention and make impactful systemic change?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think in our agency, we believe it starts at a young age, teaching our sons and boys to respect women, to be told, it's okay to be told no. They can't always get what they want. And, the idea that women are not property, that women are equal to you, girls and women can do anything that men can do, and not viewing them as just there for sexual gratification or just there for power and control, something that you can claim. And that's been really around for so long. Wives were seen as property. That's kind of still today. I took my husband's last name, things like that. So that's a tough one. We still got a lot of work to do, but educating folks, not victim blaming, believing women, and just teaching our sons from a young age. I think, like you said, rape culture is so steeped in our culture, and talking about it and doing educational programs like these, and hopefully folks can call and ask questions, and if they want more education, I'm always here.
Absolutely. That's a tremendous resource for the public to draw from. Whatever the circumstances you are going through, you can overcome these challenges and escape the violence and abuse that you are experiencing. If you're suffering at the hands of your domestic partner from intimate partner violence, also known as IPV, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline by dialing 1-800-799-SAFE or 7233, and SAFE corresponds to the number 7233. Also, we want to mention, as we mentioned earlier, that the Rape Crisis Center hotline number is area code 330-434-7273, and the Battered Women's Shelter number is area code 330-374-1111. Leanne, domestic violence is one of the most chronically underreported crimes, as you had mentioned earlier when we were talking. How can we expand the legal options available to survivors and hold offenders accountable for these criminal acts that they choose to commit against people that they claim to love?
Yeah, I think we need to completely change our culture to a culture of believing victims. Oftentimes, like for example, if someone gets robbed, somebody says, "Oh my God, I got robbed last night." Usually we say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like, are you okay?" But in situations of sexual violence and intimate partner violence, people tend to ask like a lot of why. Well, why were you with that person? Well, why? What were you wearing? What were you drinking? Why were you out so late? And I think really we need to change our culture to treat sexual crimes, intimate partner crimes like we do all other crimes, because they are indeed crimes. But I think men really have to hold other men accountable. Women can speak till they're blue in the face about ending violence towards women, but it's when a man speaks up that's when real change, I think, will happen.
I agree. In the emergency management and crisis intervention fields, we always drill on the fact that the best time to prepare for an emergency is before, not during, nor after one occurs. For example, what would be some items that should be in a person's go bag if they are contemplating leaving their abuser today? That go bag being the essential items that they need to have in case they need to leave where they are living at that moment.
Sure. I think it's important to mention that everybody's situation is different, and they can always call our hotline to help safety plan for some of these specific items. But in general, we always suggest trying to pull out some cash, pack clothes, a pair of clothes for you and children if you have them, your ID, any medications, things like that. But at the shelter, we really can provide all of those things, except not cash. But, we can provide clothing. We can help you get your ID back. We make sure that the kids remain going to school. So really, we just want that person to be safe. And if they can grab a few things that might make their lives easier, especially medications, we suggest that they do that. But again, if they're not sure what to bring, they can always call our hotline and safety plan with one of our advocates.
I see. Okay. That's good information for the public to know. Absolutely. In thinking about this interview that we were sharing today, why doesn't the curriculum in high school stress how to teach young boys and girls how to control their temper, or to teach that love does not hit, that hitting is not an option, that, love is patient, it's kind, and things along those lines? Why doesn't our high schools or the curriculum in our education do better?
Yeah, I totally agree. This is something that I'm very passionate about. Unfortunately, a lot of agencies, there's not a lot of money for prevention. There is money for reactive services. How do we help people once they become a survivor? But I really think that prevention is huge, and I would love to go into the schools and do these sort of prevention programs. But really, ultimately, or unfortunately, in Ohio doesn't have a uniform curriculum in which all public schools must teach. It's kind of up to the individual schools what they will educate on, and if they will educate on healthy relationships. But schools often do reach out to Hope and Healing to provide this education, and we are more than willing to go into the schools and teach this, because I think it's so important for kids to realize what red flags are, what green flags are in a relationship. What is consent? What does that look like? So I'm all about prevention myself.
Sure, absolutely. Those are important aspects. And hopefully, as we go forward, that type of learning will catch fire and catch on. Hopefully, with the advocacy, that if each person pushes a little bit, that'll have an impact, So we'll do our part here at Light 'em Up to continue to advocate for the things that you've mentioned in our conversation today. Okay. And regarding Hope and Healing, talk to us about donating, what's on the wish list. And I saw the link that you provided me regarding the wish list, and I will provide that information to the general public when this episode goes live. Talk to us about hosting an event and volunteering. So we're looking at donating, the wish list, hosting an event, and volunteering for Hope and Healing.
Sure. So to start with donating, due to COVID, we are not accepting any used clothing at this time. We are taking non-perishables and new clothing, cleaning supplies, things like that. But yes, our wish list has more ideas, and they can also check out our website, which maybe we'll share later.
Okay.
And click Ways to Give in the top right corner.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and remind me to make sure we give out that link to your webpage. That's crucial. We want to do that, and we'll definitely include that, like I mentioned, in our liner notes for the podcast episode. Lately, there's been a lot of talk in the circle that I run about protection orders. For security reasons, there have been people who have been seeking protection orders. So let's talk a little bit about that and try to expand some understanding on the different types of orders of protection. I know in Ohio, there are 4 distinct and different orders of protection, which sometimes people mistakenly refer to as restraining orders. But a municipal criminal court might issue a domestic violence temporary protection order, a DVTPO, or a criminal protection order, a CRPO, depending on the type of charge and your relationship to the defendant. Also, a civil domestic court issues a civil protection order, a CPO, if you are a family or household member of the defendant. And if you're being stalked, a common pleas court may issue a civil stalking or sexually oriented offense protection order, which is also known as an SSOOPO. Among all of those letters in the alphabet, what types of protection orders does your agency assist with in order to help ensure a client's safety from their abuser?
So we assist with what's called a dating civil protection order that is filed in domestic court. And this order protects survivors from a respondent who they were in a dating relationship, have no children together, and who never lived together. So we help with those civil protection orders as well as the CPOs, the civil protection orders. Our friends at Victims Assistance, they help with anti-stalking orders in Summit County.
Okay. And beyond this episode of Light 'em Up and your website, which can be found at hopeandhealingresources.org. And like I said, we'll share that again for the general public. How can we continue the learning and the education about domestic violence, interpersonal violence, and its prevention?
Sure. So folks can follow us on Facebook. We offer a lot of free trainings for the community. One coming up that I can just think of off the top of my head is non-fatal strangulation for intimate partner survivors, violent survivors, which is really interesting. But they can also check out, like you mentioned, Ohio Domestic Violence Network, or ODVN, or the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, which is RAINN. RAINN is also a great resource.
Okay, RAINN, absolutely. And let's continue. Let's talk a little bit more in depth. Let's talk about navigating resources. Navigating through community resources may be difficult and seem overwhelming, especially after experiencing a trauma. What would be an example more so of some of the other resources and organizations within the community that Hope and Healing partners with that can provide advocacy and additional support to survivors and their loved ones during the healing process?
So we partner with community legal aid a lot to help survivors with legal representation. We partner with Asia Inc. to help with our Asian American or Pacific Islander community. They help with translation at times. We work with Canopy to help LGBTQ folks find housing, and we often work with Planned Parenthood. They provide us condoms and dental dams for the shelter, and just also some education. So there's a lot of folks that we work with. I'm just thinking of a couple off the top of my head.
Sure, absolutely. Share with us the Rape Crisis Center phone number as well as the Battered Women's Shelter crisis hotline numbers, also your web address for Hope and Healing Resources. Share that information with us, if you would.
Yep. So Rape Crisis Center 24-hour hotline is 330-434-7273. The Battered Women's Shelter 24/7 hotline is 330-374-1111. And our website is hopeandhealingresources.org.
And share with us regarding the rewards that you personally extract and feel in helping women who are in crisis, and by working at Hope and Healing and the Battered Women's Shelter serving Summit and Medina counties.
Yeah, so it is probably some of the most rewarding work that a person can do to help someone come around and really realize their value, that they are worth it, they deserve to be happy. It can be the absolute hardest thing that a person has done to leave their abuser. It's not easy. It takes an enormous amount of courage. You know, when people say, why don't they just leave? It is not that easy. But it also translates to my personal life, you know, helping anyone who discloses that they are or they think they might be in an abusive relationship. I cannot stop being an advocate. I'm always an advocate for those. And seeing people come out of it and on top is just so rewarding. And I'd like to also mention, through the Rape Crisis Center side of things, when we go out on hospital calls, sitting with survivors while they're getting that forensic medical exam done, being there to emotionally support them again is just such a rewarding experience. And if folks are interested in getting to learn more or becoming a volunteer or intern, again, you can check out our website at hopeandhealingresources.org.
Absolutely. Leanne, we want you to know that we're grateful to you, number one, for your time and the information you've shared with us. Tremendous information, which I know is going to help our listeners to be educated and empowered. That's part of what we like to do here. We like to enlighten, educate, and empower our listeners with information that'll help them. We want you to always know that you'll always have a home here at Light 'em Up. If there's ever any changes to, the law or process or procedures, we always have ears to listen to you and your professional expertise. So always feel welcome in that regard. And we always like to leave with the opportunity to give our special guest the final word. So know that we're grateful to you and share whatever information that's on your heart as we get ready to close out.
Sure. I just really appreciate you reaching out to me and inviting me to speak about this topic. It is so near and dear to my heart. Would love to be back to speak more about sexual violence or human trafficking. We offer so much at Hope and Healing. Again, just thank you so much for your time, for listening, and please reach out if anybody needs anything. We are always here for you 24/7. I'm Leanne Biltz. I'm the volunteer coordinator with Hope and Healing.